There is a special kind of irony, a really rich, dark irony, in getting slapped with a $5,000 fine for poaching on the very land you are sworn by the federal government to protect. And frankly, if it wasn't so terrifyingly stupid, I probably would have framed that letter and hung it on my wall. But at the time, standing in my driveway with a thick envelope in one hand and a cup of lukewarm coffee in the other, I wasn't laughing, because I was staring down the barrel of a neighborhood war that I didn't start, but was absolutely going to finish. I'm Caleb Thorne, 34 years old, and for the last 3 years, I've lived at the absolute dead end of a cul-de-sac in Whispering Pines, a place I chose specifically because my 5 acres back right up to the Blackwood National Forest. It's quiet, it's secluded, and for a guy like me who spends his days dealing with everything from illegal logging operations to grizzly bear relocations, it was supposed to be my sanctuary. I'm not a loud guy. I keep my lawn mowed. I wave at the mailman, and I mostly just want to be left alone to decompress after a week of tracking poachers through the backcountry. But apparently, quiet is offensive to some people, specifically to a woman named Sheila Vance. Now, every neighborhood has a Sheila, the self-appointed guardian of property values who patrols the street in a pristine white SUV, looking for grass that's a quarter-inch too high or a trash can left out 10 minutes past pickup. Sheila was the HOA president, a title she wore like it was a 5-star general's rank, and up until that Tuesday in October, we had never actually spoken. I knew her only as the woman who slowed down every time she drove past my house, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, scanning my property like a radar dish. It all started on the second day of bough season. The morning was crisp, that perfect autumn chill that smells like dried leaves and damp earth, and I was in my backyard, transitioning into the dense tree line of my property. I have a very specific setup, a heavy earthen berm I built myself with a tractor, ensuring that any arrow or round stopped dead in the dirt. Safety isn't just a rule for me, it's a religion. I was tracking a 10-point buck that had been moving between the federal land and my back lot for weeks. I was fully camouflaged, silent, moving with the wind, just doing what I've done since I was 12 years old. I took the shot. It was clean, ethical, and professional. I was in the middle of field dressing the animal, respecting the harvest, when the silence of the woods was shattered not by a predator, but by a voice that sounded like a bandsaw cutting through sheet metal. "What in God's name do you think you are doing?" I looked up, wiping my hands on a rag, to see Sheila Vance stomping through the underbrush. She was wearing a white puffer vest that had clearly never seen a speck of dirt before today, and her face was a color of red that usually indicates a medical emergency. She was standing on the other side of my property line, but leaning over my fence like she was ready to vault it. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice low. "Just filling the freezer, ma'am." "You are discharging a weapon in a residential zone," she screamed, startling a flock of crows out of the canopy. "You are endangering children. You are endangering pets. This is a civilized community, Mr. Thorne, not some hillbilly shooting range." I stood up, walked over to the fence, and tried to de-escalate. "Ma'am, this is a compound bow, not a firearm. I'm on my own 5 acres, firing into a safety berm, and I have all the relevant tags and licenses. It is 100% legal." She didn't care about facts. To Sheila, the only fact that mattered was that she was annoyed, and therefore, I was wrong. She pointed a manicured finger at me, shaking with rage. "I don't care what you think is legal. The HOA has rules about noise and safety. I am calling the police, and then I am going to make sure you never touch a weapon in this zip code again." She pulled out her phone and started dialing right there, glaring at me while she demanded a dispatch unit. I just sighed, leaned against a tree, and waited. I wasn't worried about the cops. I was worried about the meat spoiling if she kept me talking too long. 30 minutes later, Deputy Miller rolled up. I knew Miller. He was a good guy, tired, overworked, dealing with real crimes. And now he was standing in my driveway listening to Sheila recite the entire penal code, or at least the version of it that existed in her head. Miller walked back to where I was, looked at the deer, looked at the berm, looked at my licenses. "Everything looks in order here, Caleb," Miller said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're well within the setback limits for the county. I can't cite a man for hunting on his own land during the season." He turned to Sheila, who was vibrating with indignation. "Ma'am, there's no crime here. He's legal. Maybe just talk to each other next time." Sheila looked at Miller like he had just insulted her ancestors. "If you won't enforce the safety of this community, I will," she hissed. She turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, slamming the door so hard I felt it in my boots. Miller just gave me a look that said, "Good luck, buddy," and drove off. I thought that was it. I thought she'd go home, vent on Facebook, and move on. I was so incredibly wrong. A week later, the envelope arrived. It was thick, heavy, official-looking. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Inside was a notice of violation that was 3 pages long. It cited unauthorized commercial activity, discharge of lethal weaponry, noise pollution, and creation of a public nuisance. The fine? $5,000. Payable in 7 days. Or a lien would be placed on my property. $5,000. For illegal deer harvest. I laughed at first because it was absurd, but then I read the fine print. It said failure to comply would result in escalated legal action and potential foreclosure proceedings. That stopped the laughter. I went into my office, sat down, and switched modes. See, when I'm in the woods, I'm a hunter. But when I'm at my desk, I'm an investigator. It's what I do. I track illegal trade rings. I build federal cases against poaching syndicates. I know how to follow a paper trail. I called the HOA office number listed on the letterhead. A young woman named Sarah answered. She sounded terrified, like she was whispering from inside a closet. HOA office, Sarah speaking. "Hi, Sarah. This is Caleb Thorne. I just got a fine for $5,000 signed by Sheila Vance. I'd like to appeal this, as none of the bylaws cited actually exist." There was a long silence. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't tell her I talked to you. She makes us write them. She says if we don't send the fines, we're not team players. She keeps a list of everyone she doesn't like." "Who else has she fined, Sarah?" I asked, grabbing a notepad. "Everyone," she said. "The Johnsons for their fence color. Mr. Henderson for his truck being too rusty. She uses the money for beautification projects, but the projects never happen." That was the thread. I thanked Sarah, hung up, and started digging. I pulled the public records for the HOA's filings. I requested the financial statements, which, as a member, I was legally entitled to. It took me 3 days of digging, cross-referencing invoices with actual work done in the neighborhood. It was clumsy, arrogant fraud. There were invoices for $20,000 in common area landscaping paid to a company that, when I looked up the LLC, was registered to Sheila's brother-in-law. I drove by Sheila's house. Her backyard looked like a resort, new pavers, an outdoor kitchen, exotic plants. The common area, at the front of the neighborhood, it was just dirt and weeds. She was funneling neighborhood fines directly into her own property renovation. I sat back in my chair, looking at the spreadsheet I'd built. She wasn't just a Karen. She was a crook. A petty, vindictive crook who was using her badge of authority to shake down her neighbors to pay for her patio. But Sheila wasn't done with me. Since I hadn't paid the fine in 48 hours, the harassment started. And I don't mean angry notes. I mean surveillance. It started with the drive-bys. She'd cruise past my house at a crawl, holding her phone up, filming. Then, I started finding footprints. One morning, I went out to my shed, where I keep my gear, my compound bows, my field equipment, and found the lock tampered with. There were muddy prints near the window. Specifically, the print of a small, expensive-looking boot with a heel that had no business being in the mud. She was trespassing. She was hunting me, looking for anything she could use to justify that fine or get me evicted. I remember standing in my kitchen, watching her car idle at the end of my driveway again, and feeling this cold, calm clarity wash over me. She wanted a war. Okay, but she was fighting a guy who catches people who hunt tigers for a living. She was out of her depth. I called a lawyer friend of mine, Mr. Sterling, a sharp guy who loves a good HOA dispute. I showed him the financials. He whistled. "Caleb, this is embezzlement. Straight up. But to nail her, we need her to commit an overt act against you. We need her to cross the line from annoying neighbor to criminal defendant in a way that can't be explained away." "Oh, she's going to cross it," I told him. "I can feel it." 2 days later, Sarah texted me. It was a screenshot of an email Sheila had sent to the board members, who were basically just her terrified cronies. The subject line was "Final Solution for Thorne." The body of the email detailed a plan to physically remove the illegal hunting structures on my land to restore community safety. She was coming the next morning, at dawn. Physically remove. She was going to destroy my property. I spent that night preparing. I didn't sleep. I set up 3 high-definition trail cameras, the kind we use for surveillance on federal sting operations. They record in 4K, have night vision, and upload to the cloud instantly. I positioned them to cover the fence line, the berm, and the entrance to my back lot. I moved my truck so it looked like I was gone. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, drinking coffee, watching the monitors on my laptop. At 5:15 a.m., the sun wasn't even up yet. The feed on camera 2 triggered motion. A figure dressed in black, and I mean head-to-toe black, like she was cat burglaring the Louvre, crept out of the woods. It was Sheila. She was carrying a massive pair of bolt cutters and a sledgehammer. I watched, sipping my coffee, as she approached my perimeter fence. This wasn't a shared fence. This was a fence I installed, fully on my land. She didn't hesitate. She brought the bolt cutters up and snap. Then again, snap. She was cutting the wire mesh, destroying a $1,000 fence with a look of grim determination on her face. She cut a hole big enough to walk through. Then, she dragged a wooden sign she had brought with her through the hole. She planted it right in the middle of my berm, swinging the sledgehammer awkwardly. Thud, thud. The sign read, in bright red letters, HOA property, no trespassing, seized for safety violations. She stood back, admiring her work, panting in the cold morning air. And then, she did the unthinkable. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I turned on the audio feed on the camera. Yes. She was breathless, sounding panicked. I need officers at 104 Whispering Pines immediately. There is a man with a gun threatening me. He's going crazy. He's violating the restraining order. Please hurry. She was swatting me. She was calling in a fake active shooter threat on a federal officer. I set my coffee cup down. That was it. That was the nail in the coffin, the dirt on the grave, and the flowers on top. I waited. 10 minutes later, sirens wailed. Not just one car, 3. Deputy Miller was back, along with 2 state troopers. They came rolling up my driveway hot, lights blazing. Sheila ran out from the backyard to meet them, screaming, pointing at my house, playing the victim of the century. He's in there. He's got a gun. I was just trying to post a safety notice, and he threatened to kill me. Miller looked tense, hand on his holster. Stay here, ma'am, he ordered. I opened my front door slowly, hands clearly visible, holding nothing but my ID wallet. I walked out onto the porch. Deputy Miller, I called out calmly. Good morning. Miller blinked. He saw me. No rifle, no rage, just a guy in flannel and jeans. Caleb? We got a call about a threat. I know, I said, walking down the steps. I watched the call happen. I have it recorded in 4K, along with the felony vandalism of my fence and the trespassing. Sheila pushed past the troopers, her face contorted. He's lying. He's a maniac. Look at the sign. I claimed this land for the HOA. Arrest him. I stopped right in front of Miller. I ignored Sheila completely. I looked Miller in the eye. Deputy, before this goes any further, there's something you need to see. I flipped open my wallet. I didn't show him my driver's license. I showed him the badge pinned to the other side. The gold shield of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, identifying me as a federal wildlife officer. My name is Caleb Thorne, I said, my voice projecting so the troopers could hear. I am a sworn federal law enforcement officer. My hunting activities are part of a biological survey for the Blackwood District. This woman has just destroyed private property, filed a false police report alleging a violent threat against a federal officer, and is currently obstructing an active federal agent. The silence that fell over that driveway was heavy. It was the kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop. Miller looked at the badge. He looked at me. He looked at Sheila. His posture changed instantly. He stood up straighter. I didn't know you were a Fed, Caleb. I don't broadcast it, I said. Keeps the work easier. But today, I'm broadcasting it. Sheila was staring at the badge, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. That's fake. You bought that online. He's a liar. Arrest him. Miller turned to Sheila. His face was hard. He wasn't the tired, accommodating deputy anymore. He was a cop who realized he had been played. Ma'am, that is a federal badge. And you just admitted to entering his property to claim it? Did you cut that fence? It's HOA jurisdiction, she shrieked, but her voice cracked. She was realizing the walls were closing in. It is absolutely not, Miller said. He reached for his belt. Sheila Vance. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? No. I am the president. You can't. You are under arrest for felony vandalism, filing a false police report, and trespassing. And I'm pretty sure Agent Thorne here is going to have some federal charges to add to the pile. The sound of those handcuffs clicking was better than any symphony I have ever heard. Sheila was sobbing now, screaming about her rights, about how she knew the mayor, about how this was a mistake. But as they walked her to the back of the cruiser, she looked back at me. I was just standing there, leaning against my truck, tapping my badge case against my leg. I walked over to Miller as they put her in. "Hey, Miller," I said. "Do me a favor. Don't charge her with the federal obstruction just yet. Let's let the locals handle the vandalism." But I handed him a flash drive I had prepared. "You might want to give this to the fraud division. It's the HOA financials. She's been embezzling about 30 grand a year to pay for that patio she loves so much." Miller took the drive, looked at Sheila in the back seat, and shook his head. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with, lady." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Sheila spent the weekend in jail because the judge set her bail high. Turns out, judges don't like people who swat federal officers. When she got out, the neighborhood had turned. Sarah had released the emails. The embezzlement was public knowledge. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. They didn't just fire her. They dissolved the current board and voted to sue her for every penny she had stolen. She ended up pleading guilty to the vandalism and the fraud to avoid the federal charges I was holding over her head like a sword of Damocles. She had to sell her house to pay the restitution and the legal fees. The last time I saw her, she was loading boxes into a U-Haul. No white SUV, no designer boots. She looked small. She looked tired. She looked at me as I was checking my mail, and she hurried to get into the truck, refusing to make eye contact. The neighborhood is different now. Sarah is the new president, but the first thing she did was scrap the beautification fines. We have a barbecue once a month. The kids play in the street. It's loud sometimes, but it's a good loud. It's the sound of people living without a boot on their neck. I still hunt my back 5 acres. Every time I draw my bow, I look at the patch of fence where the wire is shiny and new, the repair job she had to pay for, and I smile. It makes you wonder, though, how many Sheilas are out there right now, ruling their little kingdoms of cul-de-sacs and condos, thinking they are untouchable. How many people pay the fine just to make the problem go away? It took a federal badge and a surveillance operation to take her down, but not everyone has those resources. So I want to ask you guys, what would you have done? Would you have paid the fine? Would you have moved? Or would you have fought back earlier? And seriously, do we even need HOAs anymore? Or have they just become playgrounds for people who peaked in high school and need a way to feel powerful? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read all of them, usually with a cup of coffee on my back porch, enjoying the peace and quiet. Stay safe, know your rights, and never, ever let a bully tell you what you can do on your own land. Catch you on the next one.